working among and interviewing Iraq's refugees. And he just returned from Jordan in late March to share some stories with you tonight and to try to make at least a little more sense of Iraq. So, welcome, Noah Merrill.
Thank you very much.
Understand that we need to view the Iraqi refugee crisis as just another symptom of the situation inside Iraq. It's not my intention in any way to deflect attention from the even worse situation inside Iraq. So as we hear about Iraq's refugees and about the situation they're experiencing, I want us to remember that the situation in Iraq is much worse.
I have numerous individuals on the road. Do you want me to take those out? Take them out.
Experiences are the Iraqi people themselves. Because I am a poor stand-in for people whose voices are so absent, I think, in the debate related to Iraq in the United States.
10 seconds. Roger. Impact. Oh, dude.
The war and the situation in Iraq, that lack of those voices in the United States, I think, a significant, not the most significant obstacle to the anti-war movement, or people concerned about the war in the United States being able to work in support of a future of peace for Iraq. I want to tell you about my friend Sama. Sama is an 8-year-old girl from Baghdad. She's an Iraqi girl from the neighborhood of Dor. I thought, oh no, I've upset her, I've done something that's made her not want to say goodbye to me. And she came running out of her room, or of the room where she and the rest of the family slept. She came running out with this. And she said, "You're going back, right? You're going back to the United States." I said, "Yes." And she said, "You're going to tell people stories about what you've heard from us here, right?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, I want to give you this." She said, "I made this." And she said, "I want you to take this back as a gift to you and to all the people you're going to talk to from the children of Iraq, because we can't be there to tell our stories." So I'm going to put this here as a reminder to all of us that as we're speaking, that I'm not the one who should be telling these stories, and that the voices of the children and the people of Iraq are the voices that are most necessary. Because if we heard those stories, if we had those relationships, if we felt about the people of Iraq like we feel about the members of our own family, then this would not be happening. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, 1.9 million Iraqis have been displaced, internally displaced within Iraq, either on one side, from one neighborhood to another, in the case of Baghdad in many cases, or across different governorates across the whole nation of Iraq. 1.9 million. Again, for reference, Iraq is estimated to have a population of somewhere between 26 and 27 million people. Okay? UNHCR also suggests that a minimum of 2 million people have been forced across Iraq's borders as refugees, taking refuge somewhere in the region. 1.9 million as internally displaced people, 2 million plus displaced in the region. Those numbers roughly break down as about 750,000 in Jordan, 1.2 million in Syria, 100,000 in Egypt, 200,000 in the Gulf states including Saudi Arabia, 40,000 in Lebanon, 60,000 in Iran, and tens of thousands in Turkey. You get some sense, all of the countries in the region. Since 2003, or I should say in 2003, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees froze all new determination for refugee status for people fleeing Iraq. That's right, when the tanks went into Iraq, when the invasion began, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees froze all new refugee determination. And they didn't start again until during the time that I was there. At which point they were open for 3 weeks and then closed again. And I'll get to why that happened. So there has been no significant effort to recognize, to catalog, to process, to understand the situation for Iraq's refugees.
This 18-member family now struggles to run their lives out of a 3-bedroom apartment. The Al-Khamisis are Sabian, a minority religion who worship John the Baptist.
In response, in terms of recognition of Iraq's refugees and the dynamics that very, very difficult in Jordan. Coupled with that, if you were to make a list of the countries in the world, the 10 countries in the world with the greatest water scarcity issues, Jordan would be on that list, and it was on that list before 750,000 Iraqis came to the country.
Many Iraqis have responded by voting with their feet and leaving the country, and many are now here in Jordan. But it's a kind of no man's land. They're not officially recognized as refugees, but they can't go home either.
I owned, and then I was able to get out of Iraq and get to Jordan. But obviously, if you don't have anything, or if you have very little to begin with, you can't get out. You can't use those resources to escape. And so many of the people who are still in Iraq are people who don't have the resources to be able to leave. And also, many of the people who are Iraq's refugees are quite well educated, they're quite skilled, they may have been successful where they were coming from. Many of the people I interviewed were doctors, they were engineers, they were academics, they were teachers, they were people who had very, very useful skills that would be useful in any context. But they were people who were now extremely destitute and living in very, very difficult situations, having fled the country. I want to stress that Jordan and Syria have been and must be acknowledged as the most generous countries in the region in terms of accepting Iraqis who fled. They accepted the vast majority. In contrast, the United States, for example, when I arrived in February, it accepted 466 Iraqis from Iraq. Not even from Iraq, 466 Iraqi refugees, often from other countries, since the beginning of the war. 466 Iraqis since 2008. He can't pass a security screen because he could conceivably be a threat to the United States government. So before we look at the suffering of people, which has led people to become increasingly paranoid or increasingly divided amongst themselves, let's remember the very deep responsibility that we have for that ignorance and that hatred of people who we don't know. UN High Commissioner for Refugees made this very clear in that press briefing I was talking about. He said, in the whole world last year, the total number of refugees resettled from all violent conflict zones to all countries of resettlement was 50,000. That's the minimum estimate of Iraqis who are fleeing Iraq every single month. Resettlement is not an option for the overwhelming majority of Iraq's refugees. It's inexcusable. And what she said was that the U.S. believes it's important that the U.S. do its part to help, and that 7,000 was that effort, essentially, that the U.S. do its part. I think some people may agree that with me when I say that the responsibility of the United States for the Iraqi refugee crisis, for the suffering of Iraqis, is 100% of every expense of every person whose life has been destroyed as a result of this invasion and occupation and the ongoing chaos that it's causing. So for us to say that the United States is not going to be able to help or resettle all of Iraq's refugees is one thing. We can debate that. I certainly think the United States has an immense responsibility and it's the primary responsibility. But it's certainly not our part to help with just 7,000. We created the problem. Back to the United States, and I would try to collect some money from people in the United States who I knew cared so much about what was happening to be able to give them some care. And we have been able to send money to several of the families that I've already interviewed, and I'll talk about that. But Sally was on the list, and we didn't think that our situation was that serious. But I want to ask us to take a moment just to consider how many other children that didn't have their stories told in venues like this that have lost their lives as a result of this. And how many there will yet need as this continues. Can we just take a moment? This is something very important, certainly in the tradition of Quakers, to listen for that